The drone's camera captured everything: the secret meeting, the briefcase exchange, the kiss that would destroy 3 marriages. But as Karen watched her neighbors through the live feed, she didn't notice the storm clouds gathering above, or the way her expensive surveillance toy began to shake violently in the wind. One lightning flash later, her $3,000 spy drone was nosediving straight toward her own backyard pool, taking with it not just her weekend hobby, but evidence of crimes that would make her the most wanted woman in Willowbrook Heights. What she thought would expose her neighbor's secrets was about to expose her own, and some secrets are worth killing for. Karen Whitmore adjusted the joystick with surgical precision, her manicured nails clicking against the controller as she maneuvered the drone 15 feet above the Hendersons' backyard. The 4K camera captured every detail through her wraparound sunglasses heads-up display, Margaret Henderson's nervous pacing, the way she kept checking her phone, the suspicious black briefcase sitting on their patio table. Finally, Karen whispered, settling deeper into her poolside lounger. After 3 months of watching the Hendersons through her bedroom window, she'd invested in the best surveillance equipment money could buy. The Phantom X7 drone was military-grade, equipped with thermal imaging, night vision, and a zoom lens that could read text from 50 yards away. The first drops of rain spattered against her bare shoulders, but Karen barely noticed. She was too focused on the drama unfolding on her screen. Margaret Henderson, perfect, pristine Margaret with her charity galas and book club meetings, was about to meet someone. Someone who wasn't her husband. Thunder rumbled overhead and Karen's pool lights flickered momentarily. She should have been concerned about the approaching storm, but the Henderson surveillance had become an obsession. For months, she'd suspected something was off about her neighbors. The late-night visitors, the expensive packages, the way Margaret's eyes would dart away whenever they chatted over the fence. Karen's finger hovered over the record button as a figure emerged from the Henderson house. It wasn't Margaret's husband Donald, he was supposedly in Chicago on business. This man was younger, broader, with the kind of predatory stride that made Karen's pulse quicken with vindication. "Got you," she breathed, zooming in as the stranger approached Margaret. The camera captured their embrace, too intimate, too desperate for anything innocent. Karen's heart hammered as she watched Margaret pull away, gesturing frantically at the briefcase. The wind picked up, and Karen felt the drone shudder through the controller. She should bring it down, but this was the moment she'd been waiting for. The stranger opened the briefcase, revealing stacks of cash and what looked like photographs. Margaret covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. "What are you hiding, Margaret?" Karen muttered, adjusting the camera angle. The zoom revealed the photos, surveillance shots of various neighbors, including one of Karen herself stepping out of her shower. Her blood ran cold. Lightning split the sky, and the drone's camera flickered. Karen cursed, fighting to maintain control as the wind gusted stronger. The stranger was showing Margaret more photos now, intimate shots of people Karen recognized from the neighborhood. The Johnsons next door, the Petersons across the street, even old Mr. Chen from the corner house. "Blackmail," Karen whispered. The pieces clicking together. Margaret wasn't having an affair, she was being extorted. But why? And by whom? The storm intensified, and Karen's pool began to ripple with increasingly violent waves. She needed to bring the drone home, but the stranger was reaching into his jacket, pulling out what looked like a gun. Karen's hands trembled as she tried to keep the camera steady. The man grabbed Margaret's arm, his mouth moving in what were clearly threats. Margaret pointed toward Karen's house, and both figures looked up at the sky. Karen's blood turned to ice as she realized they were looking directly at her drone. Shit. Karen yanked the joystick, trying to pull the drone back, but it was too late. The stranger had spotted the surveillance, and he was reaching for something in his pocket, a phone, or worse. The drone fought against the wind as Karen desperately tried to navigate it home. Rain began falling in earnest now, and the controller's screen showed multiple system warnings. The GPS was malfunctioning, the battery was draining faster than normal, and the camera kept cutting in and out. Through the intermittent feed, Karen saw the stranger talking rapidly into his phone while Margaret collapsed into a patio chair, her face buried in her hands. The briefcase sat open between them, its contents scattered by the wind. A massive gust caught the drone, and Karen watched helplessly as it careened sideways, the camera spinning wildly. She caught glimpses of rooftops, power lines, and then her own backyard rushing up to meet her. The pool's surface reflected the storm clouds above, dark and ominous. Come on, Karen pleaded, her fingers dancing over the emergency landing controls. The drone responded sluggishly, its motors whining against the wind. She could see her own reflection in the pool's surface through the camera, a woman in a designer swimsuit, suddenly looking very small and very vulnerable. The stranger was running now, leaving Margaret alone with the briefcase. He vaulted over the fence into the Johnsons' yard, and Karen lost sight of him. But she could hear something, footsteps on her own property, the sound of her back gate opening. The drone's camera flickered one last time, showing Karen's terrified face staring up at the sky, before the feed cut to black. The controller beeped once, twice, then died completely. Karen looked up from the useless device in her hands to see the stranger standing at the edge of her pool, his expensive suit soaked with rain. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe 40, with the kind of cold eyes that suggested violence. Was just another business tool. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, his voice carrying easily over the storm. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Karen's mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression she'd ever seen. Your little flying camera captured some very interesting footage. The kind of footage that could cause problems for certain people. Important people. The drone was somewhere in a pool, 30 feet down in the deep end, its memory card full of evidence that this man would kill to suppress. Karen realized with growing horror that she'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than neighborhood gossip. The footage is encrypted, she lied, backing toward her house. You can't access it without my password. Oh, I'm not worried about passwords, the stranger said, pulling a sleek black device from his jacket. I'm worried about witnesses. Lightning illuminated his face, and Karen saw something that made her blood freeze, a small tattoo on his neck, barely visible. Above his collar. 3 interlocking circles. She'd seen that symbol before, in news reports about organized crime, about people who disappeared without a trace. The storm reached its peak as Karen realized the terrible truth: her surveillance hadn't uncovered a simple blackmail scheme. She'd discovered a network of professional criminals who had been systematically documenting and extorting her entire neighborhood. And now they knew she knew. Thunder crashed overhead as the stranger stepped closer, and Karen understood that her perfect suburban life was about to become a perfect nightmare. The drone at the bottom of her pool contained evidence of crimes that reached far beyond Willowbrook Heights, and the only question now was whether she would live long enough to see justice served. The man's hand moved toward his jacket, and Karen ran. Karen's bare feet slapped against the wet concrete as she sprinted toward her house, the stranger's footsteps pounding behind her. The sliding glass door was only 20 feet away, but it felt like miles. Rain stung her eyes, and the poolside tiles were slick with water and fear. She reached the door and yanked it open, slamming it shut behind her just as the stranger's hand hit the glass. The impact rattled the entire frame, and Karen fumbled with the lock, her fingers slipping on the wet metal. Mrs. Whitmore, the man called through the glass, his voice eerily calm despite the storm. You're only making this harder on yourself. Karen ran through her house, her mind racing. She needed to call the police, but what would she tell them? That she'd been illegally spying on her neighbors and discovered a criminal conspiracy. That a man with a crime syndicate tattoo was trying to kill her for footage trapped at the bottom of her pool. She grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect. The storm had knocked out the cell towers. And her landline was dead too. She was completely cut off. Glass shattered behind her, the stranger had broken through the patio door. Karen dropped the phone and bolted upstairs, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it over the thunder. She needed a weapon, a hiding place, something to buy her time. I know you're up there, the stranger called from below. His voice was patient, professional. My name is Vincent Cross, and I work for people who don't like loose ends. You've seen something you shouldn't have, and now we need to have a conversation. Karen crept into her bedroom and locked the door, knowing it wouldn't stop him for long. Through the window, she could see Margaret Henderson's house. The woman was standing at her kitchen window, staring directly at Karen's house. When their eyes met, Margaret quickly closed the curtains. "She's part of it," Karen whispered, understanding flooding through her. Margaret wasn't a victim, she was a willing participant in whatever network Vincent Cross represented. Karen's mind raced as she searched her room for anything useful. In her nightstand drawer, she found a small revolver her late husband had insisted she keep for protection. She'd never fired it, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Footsteps on the stairs. Vincent was coming up, taking his time. Karen pressed herself against the wall beside the door, gun raised with shaking hands. The doorknob turned slowly, testing the lock. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to be honest with you," Vincent said through the door. "The footage from your drone could implicate some very powerful people. People who would rather see you disappear than risk exposure. But I'm hoping we can work something out." "Go to hell," Karen called back, surprised by the strength in her voice. Vincent chuckled. "I like your spirit. But you need to understand what you've stumbled into. The people in this neighborhood, your neighbors, your friends, they are not who you think they are. Some of them are criminals hiding in plain sight. Others are federal agents running a long-term operation. And a few are just unfortunate souls who got caught in the middle." Karen's blood chilled. Federal agents. Her mind flew to the Johnsons next door, always friendly but somehow distant. To the Petersons across the street with their mysterious work schedules. To old Mr. Chen, who seemed to know everyone's business. "The blackmail photos," she said. "You're documenting everyone." "Very good." "Yes, we've been building files on this entire community for 2 years. Your neighbors have been living a lie, and now you've captured evidence of our operation. Evidence that could destroy years of careful work." The door exploded inward as Vincent kicked it open. Karen pulled the trigger, but the gun clicked empty. Her husband had never loaded it. Vincent stepped through the doorway, his suit torn and his face cut from the broken glass downstairs. "That was disappointing," he said, pulling out a professional-looking pistol. "I was hoping we could resolve this civilly." Karen backed toward the window, her mind racing. "The FBI knows about this neighborhood. They have agents here." "The FBI agents are part of our problem," Vincent said with a cold smile. "They've been getting too close to our real operation. The blackmail was just a cover. We've been using this neighborhood as a staging ground for something much bigger." Through the window, Karen could see more figures moving through the storm. 3 men in dark clothing were positioning themselves around her house, while another was climbing out of her pool with diving equipment. They were retrieving the drone. Money laundering, Karen realized. The expensive houses, the high-end cars, the exclusive community, you're washing dirty money through real estate. Vincent's expression shifted, becoming genuinely impressed. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." "Yes, Willowbrook Heights is a front. Every house sale, every property transaction, every renovation, it's all part of a multimillion-dollar operation. And certain federal agents were getting suspicious. So you've been blackmailing them to keep them quiet. Among others. Your footage shows our handler meeting with a compromised agent. If that video surfaces, it could unravel everything we've built here." Karen glanced at the window again. The diver was hauling himself out of the pool, the drone clutched in his hands. They had the evidence now, what did they need her for? As if reading her thoughts, Vincent smiled again. "Because you're the perfect scapegoat. A nosy neighbor who discovered a federal operation and had to be silenced. When they find your body, it'll look like the FBI agents went rogue to protect their cover. You're going to frame federal agents for my murder. I'm going to frame everyone for everything. By tomorrow morning, half this neighborhood will be under arrest for crimes they didn't commit, and the other half will be dead from an apparent gang war. The only survivors will be the ones who matter to our organization." Karen's mind reeled. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. An entire suburban community had been infiltrated and was about to be destroyed to cover up criminal activity. And she was the catalyst that would bring it all crashing down. "The storm," she said suddenly. "You planned this. You knew I'd be flying the drone tonight." Vincent's smile widened. "We've been monitoring your surveillance activities for weeks. You're not as subtle as you think. We simply waited for the right moment to let you discover what we wanted you to discover. But the storm is a happy coincidence. It cuts off communications, limits police response, and provides cover for what's about to happen. Sometimes the universe conspires to help those who help themselves. Karen heard vehicles pulling up outside, multiple cars, doors slamming, voices shouting orders. But were they Vincent's people or the FBI agents he'd mentioned? Time's up, Vincent said, raising his gun. You've played your part perfectly, Mrs. Whitmore. Now it's time for your final scene. Karen dove sideways just as the gun fired, the bullet splintering the window frame where her head had been. She rolled behind her bed as more shots rang out, wood and plaster exploding around her. Through the chaos, she heard something that made her heart leap, a voice she recognized shouting from outside, "Federal agents! The house is surrounded." It was Donald Henderson, Margaret's husband, who was supposedly in Chicago. But his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders in life-or-death situations. Vincent cursed and moved toward the window, his gun trained on the stairs. Your neighbors are about to become your saviors, Mrs. Whitmore. Too bad none of you will survive to enjoy it. Karen realized with growing horror that the final phase of Vincent's plan was about to begin, and she was trapped in the middle of a war between federal agents and professional criminals, with the evidence of everything still locked in a waterlogged drone at the bottom of her pool. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house as armed figures stormed in from multiple directions, and Karen understood that her quiet suburban nightmare was about to become a battlefield. The first gunshot shattered Karen's bedroom window, sending glass cascading across the hardwood floor. She pressed herself against the wall as Vincent Cross returned fire, his professional calm replaced by deadly focus. Through the chaos, she could hear voices shouting tactical commands from multiple directions. Alpha Team, secure the back entrance. Bravo Team, eyes on the pool area. Target is armed and dangerous, shoot to kill. Vincent grabbed Karen by the arm, hauling her to her feet. You're my insurance policy, he growled, pressing the gun to her temple. Your federal friends won't risk civilian casualties. Karen's mind raced as she was dragged toward the stairs. The voices outside belonged to people she'd lived next to for 5 years, Donald Henderson, who coached Little League and made the best barbecue in the neighborhood. Tom Peterson, who helped everyone with their taxes. Even old Mr. Chen, whose English had always seemed slightly too perfect for someone who claimed to be a retired shopkeeper. They are all federal agents, she whispered, the pieces clicking together. Not all of them, Vincent replied, using her as a human shield as they descended the stairs. Some are genuine criminals we've been working with. Others are just unlucky bastards who moved into the wrong neighborhood. The beauty of this operation is that no one knows who's who anymore. They reached the living room just as the front door exploded inward. Donald Henderson burst through, weapon raised, his familiar face transformed by tactical gear and deadly intent. Behind him came Tom Peterson and a woman Karen didn't recognize, tall, athletic, moving with military precision. Release the civilian, Cross, Donald commanded, his voice carrying none of the warmth Karen remembered from neighborhood barbecues. It's over. Vincent laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the storm-darkened room. Is it? Tell me, Agent Henderson, does your wife know you're here? Because she's been very helpful to our operation. Donald's face went white. Margaret isn't part of this. Your wife has been passing us information about federal surveillance for 6 months, Vincent continued, enjoying the psychological warfare. Those charity events. Book club meetings. Perfect cover for dead drops and encrypted communications. The woman behind Donald, Agent Sarah Martinez, according to her tactical vest, stepped forward. He's lying, Don. Margaret was recruited as an asset, but she's been feeding us information about the money laundering operation. Was she? Vincent's smile was predatory. Or was she feeding you disinformation while we moved 30 million in dirty money through property transactions right under your noses? Karen felt the gun's pressure against her head increase as tension filled the room. The federal agents were professionals, but Vincent was playing mind games that were clearly hitting their mark. She could see doubt creeping into Donald's eyes. Uncertainty about whether his wife was a hero or a traitor. Through the shattered patio door, Karen saw movement in her backyard. Margaret Henderson was walking across the lawn, no longer the nervous woman from the surveillance footage. She moved with purpose, carrying what looked like a laptop computer. "Ah, there's my ace in the hole," Vincent said, noticing Karen's gaze. "Margaret, darling, please tell these federal agents about the files you've been keeping." Margaret stepped through the broken door, her designer clothes soaked with rain but her expression cold and calculating. "I have records of every federal agent in this neighborhood," she said, her voice carrying none of its usual warmth. "Names, assignments, personal weaknesses. Everything Vincent's people needed to compromise the investigation." Donald's weapon wavered. "Margaret, what are you doing?" "What I had to do to protect our family," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "You think your FBI salary paid for this house? For our lifestyle? I've been working with Vincent's organization for 2 years, helping them identify and neutralize federal threats." Karen watched in horror as a husband and wife, people she'd known for years, faced each other across a room filled with guns and broken trust. The suburban facade was crumbling, revealing the dark truth beneath. "The blackmail photos," Agent Martinez said, her weapon trained on Margaret. "You weren't a victim, you were documenting federal agents for assassination." Margaret's laugh was bitter. "Every barbecue, every book club meeting, every casual conversation, I was gathering intelligence. Do you know how easy it is to get people to talk about their work when they trust you?" The laptop in Margaret's hands began beeping, and Vincent's expression shifted to satisfaction. "And now we have everything. Agent identities, operational details, safe house locations. In about 30 seconds, that information will be transmitted to every criminal organization on the East Coast." "Stop the upload," Donald commanded, his voice breaking with emotion. "Stop it yourself," Margaret replied, setting the laptop on Karen's coffee table. "But you'll have to shoot your wife to do it." Karen realized she was witnessing the systematic destruction of everything she'd believed about her community. The Hendersons' marriage, the neighborhood's safety, the very concept of trust between neighbors, all of it was collapsing in real time. Vincent used the moment of hesitation to drag Karen toward the back door. "While you're having your domestic crisis, I'll be leaving with the only witness to tonight's events." But as they reached the patio, Karen saw something that made her heart stop. The diver who had retrieved her drone was lying motionless beside her pool, the device smashed beside him. Standing over his body was Mr. Chen, but he no longer looked like a harmless elderly man. He held a military-grade rifle with practiced ease. "Vincent Cross," Mr. Chen said, his accent completely gone. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and murder." Vincent's grip on Karen tightened. "Agent Chen. I should have known the FBI would plant their most experienced operative in the perfect cover identity." 20-year veteran. Chen replied. "I've been tracking your organization for 3 years. The suburban operation was just the tip of the iceberg." Karen's mind reeled. Mr. Chen, who had helped her with her garden, who had brought her homemade dumplings, who had seemed so genuinely kind, was a federal agent. But that meant it. "The drone footage," she gasped. "You already have it." Chen nodded grimly. "We've been monitoring your surveillance activities and using them to gather intelligence. Your footage tonight was the final piece we needed to bring down the entire network." Vincent's professional calm finally cracked. "You used her as bait." "We used her curiosity," Chen corrected. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've been an unwitting federal asset for months. Your surveillance provided us with evidence we couldn't have obtained through legal channels." Karen felt sick. She'd been manipulated by everyone, criminals and federal agents alike. Her entire life had become a lie, and she was just another pawn in a game she'd never understood. The laptop's beeping intensified, and Margaret's finger hovered over the final key. "Upload in 10 seconds, she announced. "Unless someone wants to stop me." Donald raised his weapon toward his wife, his hands shaking. "Margaret, please. There has to be another way." "There is," Vincent said, pressing his gun harder against Karen's head. "Agent Chen, you're going to let me walk away, or I'm going to kill Mrs. Whitmore," and then Margaret activates the upload. Either way, your operation is compromised. Karen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everyone's decisions pressing down on her. She'd started the evening as a nosy neighbor with a high-tech toy. Now she was a human shield in a war between criminals and federal agents, with the future of an entire investigation hanging in the balance. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then Margaret Henderson pressed the final key, and Karen realized that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who used to be friends. The laptop screen flashed green as the upload completed, and Margaret Henderson's face showed no trace of the woman who had hosted charity brunches and book club meetings. "It's done," she said simply. "Every federal agent in a 50-mile radius is now a target." Donald's weapon never wavered from his wife, but Karen could see the devastation in his eyes. 20 years of marriage, he whispered. 20 years, and I never knew who you really were. You knew exactly who I was, Margaret replied, her voice ice cold. A woman who wanted more than a government salary could provide. A woman who was tired of watching criminals get rich while her husband risked his life for pension benefits. Agent Martinez stepped forward, her tactical radio crackling with urgent transmissions. "Base, this is Martinez. Code red. Operation Willowbrook is compromised. All agents are blown." The radio responses were immediate and terrifying. "Agent Rodriguez is down. Sniper fire from the Peterson house. Agent Williams under attack at the community center. Multiple casualties reported. Request immediate backup." Karen felt Vincent's grip tighten as he processed the chaos. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Absolutely beautiful. While you've been playing house with your suburban cover identities, my people have been positioning themselves throughout the neighborhood. Now it's open season on federal agents." Mr. Chen moved with surprising speed for his age, circling around Vincent while keeping his rifle trained. "The upload included false information," he said calmly. "We've been feeding Margaret disinformation for months. Half the names on that list are retired agents, and the other half are criminals we've been tracking." Margaret's composure cracked. "For the first time. That's impossible. I verified every piece of intelligence." "You verified what we wanted you to verify," Chen replied. "The real federal agents in this neighborhood have been operating under completely different identities. You've just sent Vincent's people after our decoys." Vincent's laugh was sharp. "And dangerous. Clever. But you're forgetting something, Agent Chen. I still have Mrs. Whitmore, and she's the only witness to tonight's events who isn't a federal agent or a criminal. When this is over, she'll be the one telling the story." Karen's mind raced as she listened to the gunfire echoing through the neighborhood. People she'd known for years were trying to kill each other, and she was trapped in the middle of it all. But something Vincent had said stuck with her. She was the only civilian witness. "The drone footage," she said suddenly. "You need me alive to authenticate it." Vincent's grip loosened slightly. "Very good. Yes, without your testimony, the footage is just another piece of digital evidence that could have been fabricated. But with your sworn statement about what you witnessed, I could send your entire organization to prison," Karen finished. "Or I could claim I saw nothing at all." Donald's face showed the first glimmer of hope. "Mrs. Whitmore, you don't understand. The stakes here. Vincent's organization has been responsible for 17 murders in the past year. If you help them escape justice, if I help them escape justice, I live through the night," Karen interrupted. "If I don't, I'm just another casualty of your federal investigation." Agent Martinez's radio crackled again. "All units, be advised. We have reports of civilians being used as human shields. Rules of engagement are now in effect." Vincent smiled at the transmission. "Your colleagues are about to start shooting through civilians to get to us. How does it feel, Agent Henderson, knowing that your investigation is about to cost innocent lives?" Donald's face was a mask of anguish. "Margaret, please. Help us end this. Tell us where Vincent's people are positioned." Margaret looked at her husband with something that might have been pity. "Donald, you still don't understand. Vincent's people aren't positioned throughout the neighborhood. They are the neighborhood. The Johnsons, the Petersons, the Millers, they are all part of the organization. Karen felt the world tilt beneath her feet. But I've known these people for years. They are my neighbors, my friends. They are criminals who've been hiding in plain sight, Margaret continued. Perfect covers, perfect families, perfect lies. The only real residents left are you, Mr. Chen, and the federal agents who've been trying to expose them. The sound of breaking glass came from upstairs, followed by heavy footsteps. Vincent's backup had arrived, and they were moving through Karen's house with military precision. She could hear them calling out in coded signals, coordinating their positions. Time to go, Vincent said, dragging Karen toward the back door. Agent Chen, you're going to let us walk away, or I'm going to turn Mrs. Whitmore into a casualty of war. But Chen wasn't looking at Vincent anymore. He was staring at something outside, his face grim. I'm afraid we are all about to become casualties, he said quietly. Karen followed his gaze and saw helicopters approaching through the storm, their searchlights cutting through the rain. But these weren't police helicopters, they were military aircraft, and they were taking up attack positions around the neighborhood. Federal Marshals, Agent Martinez breathed. They are going to level the entire area. Vincent's professional calm finally shattered. You called in an airstrike on a civilian neighborhood. We called in containment, Chen replied. This operation has been compromised beyond recovery. The only way to protect the larger investigation is to ensure that no one, criminal or federal agent, leaves Willowbrook Heights alive. Karen stared at the approaching aircraft, understanding flooding through her with terrible clarity. You're going to kill everyone. The real residents, the criminals, the federal agents, everyone. Acceptable losses, Chen said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had made impossible decisions before. Vincent's organization has cells in 12 cities. If they escape tonight, hundreds of innocent people will die. Better to sacrifice a few dozen here than lose thousands later. Margaret Henderson began to laugh, a sound of pure hysteria. Do you hear that, Donald? Your own people are about to murder us all to protect their precious investigation. Tell me again how the good guys are different from the bad guys. The helicopters were circling now, their searchlights turning the neighborhood into a surreal theater of war. Karen could see figures moving between houses, some running toward the perceived safety of their homes, others taking defensive positions with military-grade weapons. There has to be another way, Donald said desperately. We can't just execute an entire community. The decision has been made, Chen replied. Mrs. Whitmore, you have 60 seconds to decide whether you want to die as a witness to criminal activity or as a patriot who helped her country stop a terrorist organization. Karen looked around the room at the faces of people she'd thought she knew. Donald, the neighbor who had helped her fix her fence after the hurricane. Margaret, who had brought her soup when she was sick. Mr. Chen, who had taught her to grow orchids. Agent Martinez, a stranger who was apparently willing to die for her country. And Vincent Kruss, a professional killer who had turned her quiet suburban life into a nightmare. The helicopter's weapon systems were powering up, their targeting lasers beginning to sweep across the houses. Karen realized that in 60 seconds, none of their loyalties or betrayals would matter anymore. The federal government was about to erase Willowbrook Heights from the map, and everyone in it would become a classified footnote in a file that would never see the light of day. 50 seconds, Chen announced, his finger moving toward what Karen now realized was a detonator. Mrs. Whitmore, it's time to choose a side. Karen looked at the detonator, then at the approaching helicopters, then at the faces of the people who had shaped her life for the past 5 years. And she realized that sometimes the only choice left is to reject all the choices you've been given. I choose door number 3, she said, and lunged for the detonator.